Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. My first video in over a week, basically got a bad cold, put me in bed and I just, couldn't make videos, which was really frustrating. But I have to say the two games I would have made videos for didn't help my mood or my illness either way. Both soul destroying and irritating in similar ways, especially that Arsenal game, which I went to and wasn't in the best mood for. And I'm sure by the end of it, a lot of you guys as well weren't in the best mood. Both of those games, I think, just highlighted the issues and flaws of this Chelsea side really to a monumental level. That Newcastle game really highlighted Chelsea's inability to create chances against a low block. Burnley had sort of fooled us into believing we'd maybe solve some of those problems. But once again, Chelsea really lackluster there. And then against Arsenal, just the uncertainty and of this team to defend leads, to put away teams when we do have a chance and we do score goals. We just can't finish the job off. We can't be as clinical. And both of those games are really frustrating. But the funny thing about this season is Chelsea, even when we stumble, the amount of times we have in recent games, when you look at some of the stats, the amount of points we've dropped, Chelsea still remain comfortably in fourth. 6 points is the gap between us and Manchester United, who still can't win games, and that is really aiding Chelsea at the moment. But the next three games against Leicester, Manchester United and Tottenham really are going to define this season and who is going to get that fourth spot, in my opinion. So let's hope, fingers crossed, Chelsea can rediscover some form. But transfers, of course, once again, we are getting close to the end of the transfer window and there have been no incoming arrivals, but one could be Edinson Cavani. And Matt Law and Jason Burt, the Telegraph, reporting Chelsea's Edinson Cavani pursuit reaches standoff with PSG over 12.6 valuation. We know Edinson Cavani wants to leave PSG. Apparently, Atletico Madrid is his desired location, but they've had a bid rejected for him. And apparently Chelsea in a pursuit of a striker because of Tammy Abraham's fitness and because we know there probably needs to be a striker coming in, especially if Olivier Giroud leaves for Inter Milan. Cavani seems like the only option at the moment and a lot of people want to see him come in because of his pedigree. I can't see this still happening, primarily because apparently the club want a loan. A loan's not going to happen likely with the contract situation of Cavani, with the lack of time on his contract at PSG. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, and they'll want compensation. PSG, they'll want a deal happen, as well as Cavani. He won't, as a player, want to be in a sort of limbo state before the summer. But I think my issue with this deal is deja vu once again. Chelsea moving for an older striker who's probably past his best. And my worry is Tammy Abraham. If we sign Cavani on a deal that isn't a loan, a long deal with a lot of wages, sure, maybe that deal they could make something where Chelsea would only have Cavani for 6 months, but that makes no financial sense to me. Why would you buy a player on a big deal with a lot of wages, an actual transfer rather than a loan, to only sell him? That just makes absolutely no sense to me. And I don't see the argument behind Chelsea sacrificing that amount of wages for a player only to have them for 5 months where potentially we could get in the top four. I just don't see the logic behind it and harmony within the squad. I just don't see it, because I think of Tammy Abraham, I really do, and I know there'll be the argument about Champions League football. In my last Let's Talk Chelsea, we spoke about the need for Chelsea to get Champions League football. That's very much, of course, still up in the air with Chelsea's erratic form. You don't know what Chelsea are going to do, and it does feel like progressively Chelsea are on a steady decline this season. We aren't reaching that consistent form that we had earlier in the year, and there is concern over this team's ability to score goals and create. But at the same time, I think this is a crossroads for Chelsea. I really do. I think this is a point where Chelsea can either go back to old ways, buy older players in the likes of Cavani, and risk having a similar situation happen at Higuain, Pato, Falcao, Shevchenko. I mean, we could go through the whole list once again. Or we can stick behind Tammy, which we have done this season. And Lampard has stressed many times his desire to stick behind younger players. Tammy has delivered for Chelsea. I truly do believe that. 15 goals already this season. I don't see arguments against that. This is a player who, and I think I made this argument on Twitter after the Arsenal game, that there seems to be this frustration with Tammy, and of course with his age there's going to be flaws within his game, but I get the sense because Tammy isn't worth 50 million and he hasn't been bought and he isn't a foreign player, there's this sort of distrust of Tammy and harsher criticism of him. When players like Alvaro Morata have come in for bigger fees and apparently have been the ready, finished article. Higuain was another example of a player who was a no-brainer signing, who came in and didn't deliver. But Tammy Abraham, unlike those strikers, has delivered for Chelsea. And I think it's imperative that Chelsea stick behind Tammy. I think that's one area. We do need a striker, but we need a striker who isn't going to demand first team minutes. And with the price, with the wages, Cavani is not going to come to Chelsea, leave PSG and come to Chelsea and just sit on the bench. He's not going to do it. And I think that would be a struggle with Tammy and his development. And I've seen arguments about maybe Tammy learning, but I think the best way of learning is in playing football regularly on the pitch for Frank Lampard, and he's doing that at the moment. So that's my big concern long term. I'm not just thinking about the next couple months for the end of the season. I'm thinking about the next couple of years and the concern over Tammy's development. And it's the big question looming this season that at the start of it, very much people were behind of giving youngsters chances. But this is where when, those youngsters start to fade a little and have those struggles and have those growing pains that you expect, is when fans are really tested and questioned. Are you ready to, see this out, see this project out, risk potentially missing out on Champions League football? But in the aid of, developing a player like Tammy Abraham, I know the answer from a lot of people will be no. But, you have to look at it as well in context. Chelsea are in 4th place. We still are in a decent position where Chelsea can still, in the next 3 games, basically put themselves in a really strong position. And I think Tammy's going to be essential to that. And I just don't think Cavani's the answer. I don't think he's the answer. And I just don't think the deal's going to happen. I don't think the clubs will meet the right price. And I just don't think Chelsea would risk that, And I think maybe Dembele, Werner, those players likely might be available in the summer. Chelsea could wait till the summer and get those players who are bigger names, younger players who could potentially fit in more for Chelsea's system, and a player who actually wants to be at Chelsea rather than Cavani, who I don't think would want to be at Chelsea. I think he clearly wants to go somewhere else, so that could be an issue as well. Morata was another example of a player who probably didn't want to be at Chelsea. We spent a lot of money on him, and then we saw what happened. The next story is about Mason Mount and Liam Toomey and Simon Johnson's article for The Athletic on Mount. There are many Chelsea players who have good reason to look forward to the winter break next month, but Mason Mount needs it more than most. Mount is in his first full season at the club he adores and only turned 21 recently, yet he has increasingly found himself one of the scapegoats for Chelsea's ailing form. Just as fellow academy graduate Callum Hudson-ODOI has been targeted on social media, Mount also finds himself the subject of similar negative scrutiny on a regular basis. I think Mount, that fatigue element was always going to come into play, especially with younger players who aren't, used to playing this amount of football within a season. Mount only, at the start of his career. And that fan criticism is something that I touched on Twitter after the Newcastle game that a lot of people responded to, and it just surprises me. And, when I made that video about Callum Hudson-ODOI, this very much, I think, falls into the same category of, expectation and pressure on young players. Mount had an amazing start to the season, like Tammy did. Tammy's been more able to sustain that period. Mount hasn't. I think the issue with Mason Mount, and I'm fully behind Mason Mount, and I think so much of the criticism, and, of course it verges very quickly onto abuse on social media. We know that. And I have no time for it. And it has been, this isn't only because of Chelsea's struggling form recently and his struggling form. This has been going on since like October. Even when Mount was scoring goals, there was, this obsession over criticising Mount, which I just think was weird. Even when he was doing well. I remember a game after Southampton, I think it was, when we won 4-1. And Mount had scored a goal and there was criticism of Mount. This has been going on for a long time. So this isn't solely down on his performances. I think this is down on some people's obsession with, criticising Lampard for not playing older players or playing Mount only because he's English, which I think we've made arguments about before. That just doesn't make sense when you look at players like Willian, Azpilicueta, where he could have played English players or younger players in front of them. We've had this argument before. I don't have much time for it. Mason Mount, has been struggling, and it's no surprise, and I think it falls into the same category. See Marcus Rashford, the amount of games he's played, he's been carrying injuries. We know these players carry injuries, and there has to be a wider debate and concern over the amount of football is being played at the moment. Even that winter break isn't really a winter break. It's 1 week off, which sure can have a massive impact, I'm sure, at this time of the season with the amount of games that they're playing, but it's of concern. And Mason Mount is a bright talent for Chelsea. He really is. And I think Lampard, I think Lampard sees Mount as one of his big projects as a coach. I really do. You know, of course, it started last year at Derby. He's brought him into the first team at Chelsea. He's given him that time. And like a lot of young players, he's stuck behind him, even through difficult periods. And I think that's an important thing. In previous years, many managers, when Mount would have faded, would have taken him out of the firing line, and probably he wouldn't have gone back into the team. He really would have, probably would have gone out on loan. And we know the rest of the story. Lampard isn't going to do that. It was just like the discussion I was having about Tammy Abraham in relation to Cavani. I think Mount's a similar issue. I think the problem is with Mount is I'm not sure what his best position is. That's just my opinion on what I've seen this season, because I think some of Mount's best performances have come from the wing. I think when we played 3-4-3, remember the game against Spurs, I thought he was wonderful in that game. I think he's a bit too erratic at the moment to be in central midfield. He naturally drifts out wide, and I think that's where he's best placed. I really do at the moment. I think he will naturally maybe fill a role of a central midfielder, a number 10, but you see the positions he takes up in games. I think And I think that's the issue, the uncertainty around Chelsea at the moment. Lampard doesn't know his best formation, and with that comes uncertainty, I'm sure, with some of the younger players. And I think that comes through Mount. I think it really does. Sometimes he's playing as a number 10. Sometimes he's playing out wide. Sometimes he's playing in a 3-4-3. He's playing off the striker. It's hard to know what Mount's best position is, and I think that comes into it. And I think fatigue is a big thing. And that midfield area is so congested, and it's difficult to know, like across the whole pitch, and this is a point I'll make about the whole pitch with Chelsea, it's hard to know what Chelsea's best 11 is. I don't think anyone can name it. There's concern over Kepa. There's concern over the back four. I don't know what the best back four is, really. I don't know what the best midfield trio is. I say it's Kovacic, Kante and Jorginho, but, you know, Kante's been flagging a bit recently, so that's just my preference, but I don't know. I don't know what the best front three is, so... And of course, we don't know what the style of play is really at the moment. We don't know if it's a pressing style, a possession-based style, and we don't know what Lampard's favourite formation is. I think until all of that comes into place, which you can expect with a manager only in his second year of coaching at the top level, it's going to be a struggle. And I think Mount probably is symbolic of that. But I really hope Mount is given time, is given patience like the young players, and people get behind him. Criticism is fair. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't criticise football players. I'm sure these professionals, I think I said similar when I was talking about HUDSON-ODOI, these players will be as critical as themselves. They are competitive beings, high professional athletes who want to succeed at the top level. And I'm sure Lampard will be criticising Mount, his coaches will, giving him advice. But it's when it goes into abuse that just, I roll my eyes, I really do. And it makes me so sad when I look on social media and see the way people talk about their own players. It's just staggering to me, and it doesn't come under support. It really doesn't. People just dismiss all criticism as abuse. I'm not dismissing all criticism as abuse. I will criticise Mason Mount. I will criticise any Chelsea player, but it's within reason. It's within, there is a limit. There's a line you cross, and it's the way people talk about players and the obsession over disliking players, I think, and the constant criticism 24/7 is where it just goes over a line for me. And I roll my eyes, and I think it's just not beneficial. So that is it for this edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.